The daughter had just put one leg on the sofa armrest when her father's gaze lingered on her with ill intent. He only turned away guiltily when his wife came to clear the table. But his desire was clearly ignited, and he eagerly wanted to be intimate with his wife before bed. However, his wife had no interest. Her mind was preoccupied with how to support the family. After all, her husband was unemployed and at home. She couldn't afford to delay the next day. He had just stepped off the last bus after a long day of work, when he suddenly noticed his daughter standing shivering in the drizzling rain, her face filled with despair. A bad feeling washed over her, but when she asked her daughter something, she remained silent, only urging her to hurry home. Despite having prepared herself mentally, the sight before her still terrified her, and she screamed in horror. Her unemployed husband lay in a pool of blood. It turned out that he had been driven by unbearable thirst. While Raymond was away at work, her husband attempted to assault their daughter Paula. Because they were in the kitchen, Paula, startled, immediately grabbed a kitchen knife to defend herself. Initially, she only intended to scare him away, but the intense attack caused irreversible consequences. Seeing her daughter Raymond, increasingly devastated by the memory, first gave her a comforting hug, then solemnly said, "Remember this. I killed your father. You didn't see it. So what?" Before she could even finish speaking, she told the other person to hurry back to their room to change clothes to prevent Yingming Yu from catching a cold. After wiping away her tears, she began carefully handling the body. First, drawing on her experience as a cleaner, she used kitchen paper towels to absorb the blood on the floor. Then she mopped up the remaining boots. Next, she pulled the kitchen knife from her husband's chest and thoroughly washed it with water. But just as she was about to put her husband in the freezer, the doorbell rang suddenly. To avoid being noticed, he quickly changed his coat before slowly opening the door. It turned out his neighbor was leaving the country the next morning and wanted Raymond to look after the restaurant he was about to sell. He was told to call him if anyone was interested. Raymond immediately took note. Keeping the body at home wasn't safe. It would be better to temporarily move it to the neighbor's empty restaurant. So he readily agreed to the request. At this moment, the other party noticed the boots around his neck. Fortunately, he reacted quickly, claiming that he had accidentally gotten his period on them. After seeing the neighbor off without incident, Raymond, who thought she could finally catch her breath, was startled by the sudden ringing of the phone. Initially annoyed, she didn't want to answer at all, but the phone kept ringing. She had no choice but to pick up the receiver, only to be told by her sister Saul, who loved her the most. That scene just happened when he passed away. In an instant, tears streamed down his face. Just a few days ago, he had gone with Saul to visit his aunt, who suffered from dementia, and planned to have her stay with them in a few days. Alas, the tree desires stillness, but the wind will not cease. The child desires to nurture, but youth is fleeting. However, this heavy blow also gave him the excuse of handling the body tomorrow instead of attending the funeral. "I'm too sad. Tomorrow you'll have to handle Aunt's funeral alone. If anyone gossips, just say I just had surgery and can't be discharged yet." Having said that, he, after hanging up the phone and calming herself down, Guo Dun and her daughter, under the cover of night, moved her husband's body to a restaurant not far from their home. To prevent the body from rotting and smelling bad in the heat, she even turned the freezer to its lowest temperature. However, early that morning, as she was secretly checking if the body was all right, a man suddenly poked his head in, startling her so much that she turned pale. Fortunately, the man not only didn't, a body was discovered hidden in the freezer, and a big order came in. It turned out a film crew was shooting a movie nearby, and the man was their logistics manager. He needed to order 30 meals, and since Raymond was short of money, he took the job without his neighbor's permission. One has to admit, Raymond's mental fortitude is top-notch. Even though there was a dead body hidden in the kitchen, he dared to act as if nothing was wrong, leisurely and carefree. On her way to buy groceries, she encountered neighbors and was able to borrow the meat and desserts she needed with her warm and friendly words. Because of this, she not only successfully completed her first order, but also, due to her enthusiastic service, took on the responsibility of providing lunch for the film crew every day thereafter. After finally seeing the customer off, she immediately called her sister, Saul, and used the pretext of inquiring about the funeral arrangements to explain again why she wasn't attending the funeral. "Last night when you called, I was arguing terribly with my husband. Perhaps Ramona had had enough of us, mother and daughter. Today she completely abandoned us, and I doubt she'll ever come back." Clearly, Ramona lied again, but she had no choice. Otherwise, it wouldn't be easy to explain why her husband hadn't shown up. However, she could never have imagined that her sister Saul was hiding an even bigger secret. It turns out that after seeing her aunt off this morning, she often looked after her aunt's neighbors. She overheard someone recounting an extremely strange event. "In fact, once you open, at first I had no idea that your aunt, who lived alone, had passed away. Someone called my name, so I opened the door, only to find no one there. But the main door to Aunt Nee's house, which should have been tightly closed, suddenly opened by itself. I found this strange and went inside. Not only that, when I found Aunt Nee's body, there were funeral expenses and a coffin that had been purchased in advance. But everyone knew that Aunt Nee had completely lost her ability to think before she died. It was absolutely impossible to prepare for one's own death in advance, because the entire village was superstitious and had no doubt about the existence of ghosts. Everyone present believed it was the spirit of Saul's deceased mother. After all, many people had seen Saul's mother before. Initially, Saul was skeptical until he saw his mother, who was supposed to be dead, at his aunt's house. But even then, he thought it was a ghost. So even though it was the one he longed for, even though she was timid, she was so frightened that she ran away. However, when she drove home with trembling hands, she heard her mother's voice coming from the car again. Although she was still pale with fright, at her mother's repeated requests, she mustered her courage and opened the trunk. To her surprise, her mother was indeed lying inside. Overjoyed, she burst into tears and gave her a deep hug. Her mother didn't explain much, but just said while carrying things, "Luckily, I packed these beforehand. All the valuables have been put away. Otherwise, the neighbors will surely rob them all." Of course, Tina is the only decent person besides them. While they were talking, the two arrived at Saul's house. Looking at his gray hair in the mirror, his mother cautiously reminded Saul, "Although no one here knows me, for safety's sake, tomorrow you should dye my hair and buy me a pair of sunglasses so I can go out and breathe fresh air. That is to say, from now on you'll be staying here anyway. Since you're living alone, it'll be nice to have me for company." Even when fate truly called me back, though filled with doubt, Saul didn't intend to ask, but silently memorized every word his mother said. Just then Raymond called, lying that her husband had abandoned her. Because his mother and Raymond had always had a bad relationship, Saul didn't tell them that his mother was still alive.